Well, you look terrific.
Wow, I feel terrible.
I was feeling incredibly nervous. I wasn't sure I could stick through an entire meal with him. So we talked about this and that. I was beginning to realize that the only way to make this evening bearable would be to ask a few questions. No, you know, the truth is, I think I do know what really disturbs me about the work you've described, and I don't even know if I can express it. But somehow it seems that the whole point of the work that you did in those workshops, when you get right down to it and you ask, what was it really about? The whole point, really, I think, was to enable the people in the workshops, including yourself, to somehow sort of strip away every scrap of purposefulness from certain selected moments. And the point of it was so that you would then all be able to experience somehow just pure being. In other words, you were trying to discover what it would be like to live for certain moments without having any particular thing that you were supposed to be doing. And I think I just simply object to that. I mean, I just don't think I accept the idea that there should be moments in which you're not trying to do anything. I think it's our nature to do things. I think we should do things. I think that purposefulness is part of our ineradicable basic human structure. And to say that we ought to be able to live without it is like saying that a tree ought to be able to live without branches or roots. But actually, without branches or roots, it wouldn't be a tree. I mean, it would just be a log. You see what I'm saying? I mean, in other words, if I'm sitting at home and I have nothing to do, well, I naturally reach for a book. I mean, what would be so great about just sitting there and doing nothing? It just seems absurd.
And if Debbie is there?
Well, that's just the same thing. I mean, is there really such a thing as two people doing nothing but just being together? I mean, would they simply then be relating, to use the word we're always using? I mean, what would that mean? I mean, either we're going to have a conversation, or we're going to carry out the garbage, or we're going to do something separately or together. I mean, do you see what I'm saying? I mean, what does it mean to just simply sit there?
That makes you nervous.
Why shouldn't it make me nervous? It just seems ridiculous to me.
That's interesting, Wally. You know, when I went to Ladakh in Western Tibet and stayed on a farm for a month, well, there, you know, when people come over in the evening for tea, nobody says anything, unless there's something to say, but there almost never is, so they just sit there and drink their tea, and it doesn't seem to bother them. I mean, you see, the trouble, Wally, with always being active and doing things is that I think it's quite possible to do all sorts of things and at the same time be completely dead inside. I mean, you're doing all these things, but are you doing them because you really feel an impulse to do them? Or are you doing them mechanically, as we were saying before? Because I really do believe that if you're just living mechanically, then you have to change your life. You know, when you're young, you go out on dates all the time, you go dancing or something, you're floating free, and then one day suddenly you find yourself in a relationship, and suddenly everything freezes. And this can be true in your work as well. I mean, of course, if you're really alive inside, then of course there's no problem. I mean, if you're living with somebody in one little room and there's a life going on between you and the person you're living with, well, then a whole adventure can be going on right in that room. But there's always the danger that things can go dead. Then I really do think you have to kind of become a hobo or something, you know, like Kerouac, and go out on the road. I really believe that. You know, it's not that wonderful to spend your life on the road. And my own overwhelming preference is to stay in that room if you can. You know, if you live with somebody for a long time, people are constantly saying, well, of course it's not as great as it used to be, but that's only natural. The first blush of a romance goes, now that's the way it has to be. Now, I totally disagree with that. But I do think that you have to constantly ask yourself the question with total frankness. Is your marriage still a marriage? Is the sacramental element there? Just as you have to ask about the sacramental element in your work, is it still there? I mean, it's a very frightening thing, Wally, to have to suddenly realize that, my God, I thought I was living my life, but in fact, I haven't been a human being. I've been a performer. I haven't been living, I've been acting. I've acted the role of the father. I've acted the role of the husband. I've acted the role of the friend. I've acted the role of the writer, director, what have you. I've lived in the same room with this person, but I haven't really seen them. I haven't really heard them. I haven't really been with them.
You know, I know some people are just sometimes existing just side by side. I mean, the other person's face could just turn into a great wolf's face and just wouldn't be noticed.
And it wouldn't be noticed. No, it wouldn't be noticed. Except in the most extreme situations. I mean, to some extent, I still had the ability to live in my work. That was why I was such a work junkie. That was why I felt that every play that I did was a matter of my life and my death. But in my real life, I was dead. I was a robot. You know, I didn't even allow myself to get angry or annoyed. I mean, you know, today, Chiquita, Nicholas, Marina, all day long, as people do. They do things that annoy me, and they say things that annoy me. And today, I get annoyed, and they say, why are you annoyed? And I say, because you're annoying, you know. And when I allowed myself to consider the possibility of not spending the rest of my life with Chiquita, I realized that what I wanted most in life was to always be with her. But at that time, I hadn't learned what it would be like to let yourself react to another human being. And if you can't react to another person, then there's no possibility of action or interaction. And if there isn't, I don't really know what the word love means, except duty, obligation, sentimentality, fear. I don't know about you, Wally, but I just have to put myself into a kind of training program to learn how to be a human being. I mean, how did I feel about anything? I didn't know. What kind of things did I like? What kind of people did I really want to be with, you know? And the only way that I could think of to find out was to just cut out all the noise and stop performing all the time and just listen to what was inside me. See, I think a time comes when you need to do that. Now, maybe in order to do it, you have to go to the Sahara, and maybe you can do it at home, but you need to cut out the noise.
Yeah, of course, personally, I usually don't like those quiet moments, you know, I really don't. I mean, I don't know if it's that Freudian thing or what, but, you know, the fear of unconscious impulses or my own aggression or whatever, but things get too quiet, and I find myself just sitting there, you know, as we were saying before. I mean, whether I'm by myself or I'm with someone else, I just have this feeling of, my God, I'm going to be revealed. In other words, I'm adequate to do any sort of a task, but I'm not adequate just to be a human being. I mean, in other words, I'm not, if I'm just trapped there and I'm not allowed to do things, but all I can do is just be there, well, I'll just fail. I mean, in other words, I can pass any other sort of a test, and I can even get an A if I put in the required effort, but I just don't have a clue how to pass this test. I mean, of course, I realize this isn't a test, but I see it as a test. I feel I'm going to fail it. I mean, it's very scary. I just feel totally at sea. I mean,
you know, I could imagine a life, Wally, in which each day would become an incredible, monumental, creative task, and we're not necessarily up to it. I mean, if you felt like walking out on the person you live with, you'd walk out. Then if you felt like it, you'd come back. But meanwhile, the other person would have reacted to your walking out. It would be a life of such feeling. I mean, what was amazing in the workshops I led was how quickly people seemed to fall into enthusiasm, celebration, joy, wonder, abandon, wildness, tenderness. Could we stand to live like that?
Yeah, I think it's that moment of contact with another person. I mean, that's what scares us. I mean, that moment of being face-to-face with another person. I mean, now, you wouldn't think it would be so frightening. It's strange that we find it so frightening.
Well, it isn't that strange. I mean, first of all, there are some pretty good reasons for being frightened. I mean, you know, a human being is a complex and dangerous creature. I mean, really, if you start living each moment, Christ, that's quite a challenge. I mean, if you really reach out and you're really in touch with the other person, well, that really is something to strive for, I think. I really do.
Yeah, it's just so pathetic if one doesn't do that.
Of course, there's a problem, because the closer you come, I think, to another human being, the more completely mysterious and unreachable that person becomes. I mean, you know, you have to reach out. You have to go back and forth with them, and you have to relate, and yet you're relating to a ghost or something. I don't know, because we're ghosts. We're phantoms. Who are we? And that's to face, to confront the fact that you're completely alone, and to accept that you're alone is to accept death.
You mean because somehow when you are alone, you're alone with death? I mean, nothing's obstructing your view of it or something like that.
Right.
You know, if I understood it correctly, I think Heidegger said that if you were to experience your own being to the full, you'd be experiencing the decay of that being toward death as a part of your experience.
The world comes in quite fast. Now, that again may be because we're afraid to stay in that place of forgetting, because that again is close to death, like people who are afraid to go to sleep. In other words, you interrelate, and you don't know what the next moment will bring, and to not know what the next moment will bring brings you closer to a perception of death. You see, that's why I think that people have affairs. I mean, you know, in the theater, if you get good reviews, you feel for a moment that you've got your hands on something. You know what I mean? I mean, it's a good feeling. But then that feeling goes quite quickly. And once again, you don't know quite what you should do next, what'll happen. It's all, I think, to give you the semblance that there's firm earth. Well, have a real relationship with a person that goes on for years. That's completely unpredictable. And you've cut off all your ties to the land, and you're sailing into the unknown, into uncharted seas. You know, people hold on to these images of father, mother, husband, wife, again, for the same reason. as they seem to provide some firm ground. But there's no wife there. What does that mean? A wife, a husband, a son. A baby holds your hands, and then suddenly there's this huge man lifting you off the ground, and then he's gone. Where's that son?